Hi, Risa. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I am good. Can't complain. Where are you right now?
I'm downtown Manhattan in my apartment.
You have had an illustrious career as a performer, as a educator, as an artistic advisor, and you to me define um, a creative life. You know, your creative practices to me really navigate inside and outside of the studio. So I'm very excited to connect you to our network.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Those are nice words, Brandon. I'm a New Yorker, and when I was very young, my great aunt said to my mother, "Oh, she has to go to some kind of theater school because she's insane." And so my mother sent me to a local dance studio, and it's interesting for me. I don't think my young years were fascinating in any way compared to, say, when I hear yours or somebody else's who's been tap dancing since they were in womb. The thing that was fascinating for me was I had no voice, no speaking voice. I was always nervous and crying. And all of a sudden, when I walked into the studio, I learned that there was a different kind of voice to have.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt if I worked hard, somebody would really appreciate that voice. And that has carried me through. I didn't actually get a speaking voice without crying until I was about 21.
Wow.
So dance really fed that. And really, the harder I worked, the better I was appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
So my relationship to work and being well is really, they're totally married.
Right.
So work is one of my favorite words.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to the High School of Performing Arts, not because my parents thought I would be a dancer, but because the high school I would have gone to was having a lot of strife.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, "Oh, okay, you can apply for that," and I got in. And then I went to Juilliard, not because my parents were okay with my being a dancer,
Right.
but because my father and I made a contract, because I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to just go in the profession, that I could go to a conservatory. That was the lowest level of education he would accept from me.
It's something that I love about dancers and creative people in large is that it's innately always in us. You know, no matter what form it's in, it's like we hear so many stories of like, this is just what I have done my whole life, and it just sort of snowballs and keeps going, and I love that. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, it just kept unfolding. I to be honest with you, I wasn't saying I want to be a dancer. It was just, oh, this felt good, this felt safe, I was appreciated, I had a not such a great home life, so that really was a nice balance, and it just kept being there for me. Actually, if I would be totally honest, had she sent me to theater school, I think I would have been a better fit in some ways. I don't have a dancer's body. I've had to work hard. I don't have long, elastic hamstrings, and
right.
I'm smaller than many. And so it wasn't just that, oh, look at that instrument, and oh my God, what facility.
Right. But that's
and so being an actress with the person.
But that's where the work comes in that you were talking about. That is sometimes keeps your interest. You know, like that's an interesting process of being a dancer. So you've had an incredible performing career, but I wonder how did you and when did you start teaching?
Yeah, teaching for me I've been doing it now for many, many decades. I will not confess how many. And it's probably the thing that that feeds me the most and keeps me the most terrified all the time. So I was a Graham major at Juilliard, and primarily I did Lamont, but Graham was really my heart. And there was a Graham tutorial for students who were having a hard time getting the sequence together or understanding it. I taught that tutorial when I was a student there.
Oh,
And
cool.
so that's really how it started. And then, but teaching has always been pretty much everything for me. It's been the greatest teacher I've ever had, and I had brilliant teachers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really brilliant teachers. But teaching is the best teacher. It's been something that has supported me throughout my career. When I was on the road, and that's an erratic life, before I had a full-time job. It has really been parallel lines for me. I didn't start teaching when I stopped performing. It's been a consistent 2 parallel lines.
And that's interesting in a way that, and I found through my teaching that it informs my work as
Absolutely.
a performer, and it informs my work as a student.
Right.
That it completely can change your perspective of what you're bringing when you're flipping both sides. And I wonder if you have some core values or some common themes that you try to incorporate, because I know you teach so many different classes. You teach senior production, which is essentially a producing class. You teach your technique classes. You teach elements of performing, which to me was the most transformative class I ever had. And I wonder how those core values sort of become malleable with the different types of classes you're constructing.
I think the overriding umbrella for me as a teacher is I really want people to learn. That is my goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a decision a long time ago that, and it wasn't a conscious decision, it was having people learn is more important to me than giving information and not having it understood. If information isn't being understood, my goal is to make sure it is. If it means I have to step back, if it means I have to go slower, if it means go home and figure out another way of walking into it.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are 2 schools of teaching, big schools of teaching. One is you give information, they get it, they don't. That's a little bit the way my generation was taught.
Yeah.
And then there's the generation that says, okay, I can really push Brandon, but I can't really push the other kid next to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm a little bit aware of how that person works
Right.
and learns versus how Brandon learns.
Right.
And that's very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And other overriding principle I have is my goal to never create new problems. So I always, and when I teach teachers methodology, it's how do you really identify what the problem is versus solving the result of the problem, and then you've created another problem. So that's very big for me. For example, there are words you'll never hear me say hold. And then yell at them because they're no longer breathing. But I just told them not to breathe, basically, because that's what people do when you say hold.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very sensitive to those things. I'm very pro-student.
And you touched on it a little earlier, and I wonder if you can expand if it's a conscious choice that you clearly, through your teaching, allow individuality. Like in all of your classes, there's never like a cookie cutter sort of form, and you sort of see everyone as how can I work with this person to make them the best version of themselves, which I think gets lost so much in large classes. And are there ways that you focus on that? Is that a sort of relationship that builds over time, or do you allow that like from the beginning? Can you just see that and click into that? Right.
Our goal is to make you the best dancer you can be at any given time. Yeah. It's interesting. Many years ago, I used to teach in Montreal a lot. And there was a young man in the class who had what we would consider technique. And I thought, he's never going to be able to talk. He's not a dancer. And I was really sweetheart. I liked him. He was a sweetheart. And then he graduated and he got into the main company, contemporary company in Montreal. And it really impacted me because I was wrong. I was wrong to make that assessment. And because I only saw it through a very narrow lens.
Mm-hmm.
And that really shifted me.
Mm-hmm.
He shifted me. And he's a beautiful dancer, and I don't think he's not, and he's no longer performing, but he was a stunning addition to that company. And so it made me broaden what I understood a dancer to be and a dancer to look like.
Yeah.
And I started getting more definition of what that is from the individual versus me imposing that on the individual.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing individuals grow through a period of time. You, like I mentioned, you work with dancers that have transitioned right out of high school and are having a whole new experience. And I wonder if you could touch upon maybe some things that you think would help ease the transition for dancers going from high school into college, and then tools that you see or use throughout their college time to sort of build that individuality.
Well, here's my truth about that is it's not an easy transition, and don't expect it to be. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I find immediately is, and I'll ask the question this, like, what was your confidence level the day you received a letter saying you got into the school of your choice? Mm-hmm. And 10, and what is it now? 6. Mm-hmm. And then later what is it? 2? And all because they're no longer the 1 or 2 or 3 dancers of that place, mm-hmm. right? They're one of many fantastic, all equally talented, gifted with an enormous amount of potential. That's a big thing to get over. Mm-hmm. And to really start thinking about what is comparing, what is comparison and comparative, what is necessary about that, if anything. How do I see myself not as a reflection of what somebody else is doing? How can I learn from that person? I mean, one of the things that I talk about all the time is when I was a student at Juilliard, I used to stand next to the person who jumped the highest so that I could jump as high. Mm-hmm. And then jumped higher than they did. I hung out there for a while, loving that. And then I went to the person who turned the most. Mm-hmm. So that you get to learn a lot from these people who you deemed as having information that maybe you want.
Yeah.
So versus feeling bad about yourself, saying, yo, look at what that person does. How does that person do that? Mm-hmm. I'm going to learn how to do that too. When you've come from a studio and you're going into another situation, you may be hearing things from teachers that you think are opposing where you've come from. Mm-hmm. And that is tricky. And I always say to teachers, young teachers or any teacher, that you don't want to take something away from them. Yeah. You always just want to give them more information, and then they choose what to do with it.
Right.
I'm very careful. I'm not perfect at it, but I'm always careful not ever saying, like, what are you doing or why are you doing that? But here's a way to do it. See if this works for you. Mm-hmm. Instead of doing that, let's try this, and then it's yours, and you get to make choices.
Right. Giving options and giving someone responsibility is another way to let them think for themselves and grow. You, in addition to being an incredible educator, you're also artistic advisor. Is that what title you would use? A choreographic consultant?
Right. Well, there are lots of titles that people enjoy putting on that role.
Yeah.
So I'm so fortunate. Don't ask me how this happens. I really don't know. Because I do not choreograph. I've choreographed one piece in my life, and I was an insomniac during the whole class. Very lucky. For me, in some ways, Brandon, it's like teaching. It's having the same eye. Right. So I ask, in life, always, I ask a bazillion questions. And so if a choreographer says, well, I'm seeing this, and I'll say, well, that's in your head, and I appreciate that's in your head. But because it's in your head, you think we're seeing it, and we're not. Mm-hmm. You get to do what you want with that. Right. Worked with for a long time. And he and I will sit there and I'll say, well, why don't, if you put that person over there, look at what that does. And that might sometimes crack it open. Like I will be much more, hey, what if you do this?
Right.
With some choreographers, I'll just say, I don't see that, and you say you want this. Now, I might give them a suggestion about whether it's tempo or facing or, well, why are they facing downstage if what you want them to be doing is to communicate with each other? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you defend that to me? Because all I'm going to see is what you give me. Mm-hmm. Right? I'm not going to know this backstory unless you give me that information. But for many years, I sat on the New York State Council for the Arts dance panel. And that really made me realize that it can't be work about my aesthetic that I like and dislike work that is not my aesthetic. Mm-hmm. That's a horrible panelist. So I had to really think about, okay, what is dance? What do I define as well-crafted dance? And I had to really, I know what my aesthetic is. I don't have to redefine that. It doesn't mean that something that isn't my aesthetic isn't valuable and worthy of anything and everything. Right. And I think that really helped me be a broad eye when I'm looking and working with choreographers.
And to sort of take it back to the classroom, I wonder how you add that into your teaching. You know, if you're making up a class structure or combinations, what are some thoughts you have to, you know what your aesthetic is, but you're not necessarily training people for that. Like, how do you think of that when you're structuring a class or building movement phrases?
I think there's certain tools of dancing that I really believe in, like technical tools, that I really have saved me as a dancer. Yeah. And I think those are the tools that I'm always harping on. Mm-hmm. Rooting and using the opposite side of your back and using focus and backspace and standing on two legs when one's in the air and things that you hammered into you. Yeah. So I think that's my goal, is to always challenge those tools and to then discover those tools. Mm-hmm. The movement that I use to do that, say it's not what you're teaching, it's how you're teaching it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and I think one of the things about Limon and today is that I think Limon really gives you a concrete foundation to be a contemporary dancer. Mm-hmm. Because it teaches you how to release your weight and not get a concussion. Yeah. So those things are important to me. That's not necessarily understood by those who are taking it at a young age of 17. Mm-hmm. But it ultimately, I think, finds its path to that.
I love that idea of taking those sort of things that helped you, the tools that you learned as a student and implementing those, because I feel like I know I struggle with this building classes, is that I get so caught up on the step. I can spend a half hour making a tendu combination, but it's not really about the tendu. It's about the sort of core values and what you're trying to get across. And I think that's a really great point. Yeah. Risa, you, for me, are the definition of a mentor, and you truly are an educator in the way that, how one person can change your whole life. You are that to me, and that is so powerful, and I'm learning as I'm growing as a teacher that is the biggest gift as a teacher, is to pass that knowledge and to have that effective change. So I just want to thank you so much for affecting so much positive change in my life, and for chatting with me in Dance Device Lab today.
That's so meaningful to me. Thank you so much.
To be continued, and I look forward to connecting soon. Thank you so much for your time and energy. This has been so incredible. So
thank you so much, Brenda. Be well.
Okay, you too. Okay.
Ciao.
Bye.